Ready to go?
We're ready to go.
All righty, I'm ready to go. So if everyone else is ready to go, and it's Friday, so just thanks so much for making a late evening on a Friday and accommodating everybody's schedules. I know it's like a Friday evening. People are like, "You have a board meeting on a Friday?" I'm like, "Yep." So we will do what we need to do and then get through, and hopefully you'll have a weekend to enjoy. We have three new members sitting in and on our board now, and I want to welcome them. And right now, I see two of them with us. So when we see the third one come in, we will do the introduction. But first of all, I see Representative Steve Berquist in the room. And Steve is a representative for the 11th Legislative District and is in the House and is my counterpart in the House in the Human Services Early Learning space, but also sits as a member of Appropriation, Education, and chairs the Early Learning, as I said, in Human Services Committee. Also, great for us as a school teacher and make sure that schools, kids, and staff are really represented and we're doing what's best for all kids across the state. And really excited to have the expertise you're going to bring to the table here, but also really thankful for the partnership we have and the work we're doing for kids that we know is the work of DCYF. So welcome to the Oversight Board. And next is Anna Armstrong. Hi, Anna. And how are you? And I'm glad to have you here as well. And Anna is the Director of Education at the Kalispell Tribe and has worked at the Camas Learning Center since 2005. She's also the Vice Chair of the Washington State Native American Education Advisory Committee and the current President of the Washington State Indian Education Association. Love that you are here. So thankful to have perspective and really looking forward to what you bring and the value you'll add to this board as well. So just thanks so much for being here and being willing to serve on the oversight board. And then the
Thank
third member we have, and I don't see her in the room yet, but that's Mary Sprudy Garland from the governor's office, and she is now representing them. She is the senior policy advisor, and her focus is child welfare, early learning, and juvenile rehabilitation. And previously, she was the senior policy advisor at DCYF, so is well versed on all things happening within the agency, but also a great representative from the executive branch, and really looking forward to not only the knowledge, but also the guidance that she'll be able to bring to the board. So incredibly wonderful to have three new members and been really pleased to be able to move those appointments along so that we have a group of folk that we can help focus on, the needs of kids and families and the work that DCYF does for us. So that's kind of the introduction piece. And I think next is Nicholas, if we could just do roll call, and we could kind of go from there.
All right. Okay, let's see. If I could just get you to unmute and let me know you're here when I call your name. Anna Armstrong.
Present.
Representative Steve Berquist.
In the house.
All right. Katie Byron.
Present.
Bobby Bridge.
Present.
Senator Leonard Christian.
Present.
Representative Tom Dent. Ben DeHaan.
Present.
Thank you. Dr. Marion Harris.
Present.
Pamela Javier.
Present.
Thank you. Oh, I see. Let me let April in. There we go. Danielle Johnson.
Present.
Ruth Kagi. And Dr. Diane Levy. I know she'll be a few minutes late. Lois Martin. Mary Spruti Garlant, April Messenger.
Present.
Thank you. And Senator Claire Wilson.
Present.
Thank you. With that, we do have quorum. Next, I'd like to request the board consider approval of the January 17 meeting minutes. Does anyone have any edits or feedbacks on the minutes at this time?
This is Bobby Bridge, move to approve.
Second.
Thank you. So Bobby moved to approve. Katie Byron second. And with that, the meeting minutes are approved. And then
Awesome.
one announcement
go
wanted
ahead.
to
You
just
had a first
make.
and a second, but you didn't have a vote.
What?
You had a first and a second, but you did not take a vote to
Oh,
approve.
thank you. Yes. All in favor of approval of the January 17 meeting minutes as are, please vote aye.
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 Perfect. Thank you for catching that, Senator Christian.
I'll abstain since I wasn't at that meeting and cannot vote.
Understandable. And I just want to say one thing, just acknowledge that Lisha is not at this meeting. She's currently on bereavement leave. Her mother has passed. So we, I think I speak for all of us. We all wish her the best during this time.
Yeah.
Senator
Also-
Wilson, Senator
Yes.
Wilson, this is Bobby.
Yeah.
Should we not send a condolence card or some kind of from us
Yeah.
as a body?
Yes, and I would say yay, and we can do that, and we'll say that both Diane and I have been in contact with her and wanted her to make sure that she knew that she came first and her family came first, and that that was the most important thing, was to take care of herself and that we could take care of ourselves. And so Nicholas has been really awesome in that as well. So, but yes, we can certainly do that. And the question would be, can we send it on behalf of the board? Would that be appropriate? And we can make sure that that happens. Thank you. And I will do that, duly noted. Thanks, Bobby. Appreciative. And I know it will mean everything to her as well.
Excuse me a minute. Tom Dent is actually trying to get in the building right now
Oh,
to attend in person, and he cannot get in.
okay. I will try to go get him in.
Can I keep going? Do you need to go do something, Nicholas? And can you just leave us to our own devices if you...
Yes, I believe I can. I think next would just be getting Jenny Hedden, and she is already in as a panelist, so she should be free to go when she's introduced.
Okay. I just want to make sure you don't think you have to be in two spots at two times, which you really, right now, it looks like you are the only one there. And so
Yes,
just want to make sure you can do what you need to do.
yes, I'll go get Representative Dent in. Thank you.
Okay.
And he's on the
okay.
north side, by the way, the north side door.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Thanks, Senator Christian. You know, yeah, it's like, what door? Oh, no. All right. So while Nicholas is off opening doors, I want to introduce Jenny Hedden, who's the Deputy Secretary, Chief of Staff for DCYF, and is going to talk a bit about the federal grant pause. And I know every day we wake up, there's something different happening, and I'm really kind of curious. I know people have a lot of worries and wonders about how we're responding to that. And so I will pass it on to you, Jenny, and then we can, I know, have time if people have questions, and if you have answers, that would be awesome as well. And you may not.
I will do the best that I can to answer
Awesome.
any questions. We are obviously, as you noted, the situation is extremely fluid, and kind of each day we're getting different information and new information from our sort of federal partners there. And so happy to kind of give a little brief overview of what has happened to date. And then, yeah, happy to answer any questions, and anything I can't answer, we'll certainly be able to follow up and get back with you all on. So there's a number of different kind of components happening to the federal piece. I'll speak first about the federal funding, but there's a couple other items that I might highlight as well for you. So on January 28th, I think many of you will probably might have been tracking that there was the federal government announced that they were going to be shutting down, not giving states access to funding through the federal systems, pending sort of review of the types of programs that federal money was being spent on, and if any of that federal money was going to programs that were not in keeping with the Trump administration edicts and other executive orders that they have been giving. So we were, we saw the press release like everyone else. That was essentially how we kind of got information. Our staff actually attempted to make a federal withdrawal that same day. We knew that the system was supposed to be closed in the afternoon. We attempted to draw funding in the morning, and actually the system was already locked for us to draw funding at that point in time, with just kind of a reference to that they were not going to be issuing any grants at the time. So Washington State, along with many other states, took pretty immediate action. The Attorney General's office filed suit along with many other states against this particular action. DCYF was a declarant in that action, and I can put a link to the AG's press briefing on this as well in the chat. So because of that injunction, they have then turned the website back on later on that afternoon, and we have subsequently been able to draw federal funds. I will just note that the actual executive order and action at the federal level, at that level, is still in effect. And what we have right now is just a court injunction against that particular maneuver. So they haven't actually rescinded that directive. They're just still waiting, sort of pending outcome of additional court action here. And so we're watching that closely. We are also watching that we are currently under a continuing resolution at the federal level for funding in general, and that ends in March. So we have kind of multiple potential concerns with the federal funding that we might be receiving from the federal government right now. And we're watching that situation closely. We're also doing a number of sort of analysis to say, like, how long can we go before we see impacts that we would have to curb spending, for example, on our side, because we simply didn't have the federal funds available, even if state funds were available to us. And we really can't last a super long period of time. We can buy ourselves usually somewhere between 6 weeks to a couple of months, depending on kind of where we are with federal draws. And so we're, again, really watching this situation closely to see what happens in terms of the federal funding. I'd also like to just note a couple of other things that we have seen at the federal level. So many of the programs have received directives to remove any references to Health and Human Services or other federal entities from our websites, and to put disclaimers that anything that we're doing do not reflect the opinions of the federal government. And so we've gotten some of those directives, and we're kind of looking at our website right now to see if we're out of compliance with any of those requests. We are also seeing information that has been available to us previously, data sets that have been available through federal websites, be removed as well. And so if there are any that we must have access to, we're looking at like what the avenues might be to make sure that information is still available to us. So we're seeing sort of a number of different items. The last piece that we were also a declarant in was the executive order around birthright citizenship. And many states also filed suit on that. And that was, again, sort of preliminarily injuncted at the federal level, and pending looking at that possibly at the Supreme Court level. So happy to put some information in the chats from the AG's office on these different actions that are being taken, but it is certainly a fluid and evolving situation that we're watching very closely.
Folks have questions for Jenny. Senator Christian.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Hey, what's going to happen to the funding when they realize that there's 17 states violating the Hyde Amendment and that funding is blocked? Any clue on that or any working on there?
We were just really trying to keep in contact with our attorney generals to give us the lay of the land in terms of like what are these court decisions and how do they actually impact us and what actually has to happen next. But we are, I think, doing another sort of series of assignments, drills from Office of Financial Management to be looking at all of these potential impacts and which ones. And we obviously, also important to note, we have a variety of federal funds that are sort of in different buckets. So we get open-ended entitlement money that looks like Title 4E entitlement, Medicaid entitlement funding. But then we also have what we call like lidded grants or, discretionary type of spending. So, social service block grant funding, SSBG, has been potentially on the chopping block at the federal level for many years. Certainly under consideration, I think, again, we use SSBG funds to offset the cost of our social worker costs. So, and we also use, for example, TANF as offset to social worker costs. And so we are concerned about some of those federal funding sources in terms of holes that would potentially create in our budget. And we're also doing simultaneous reduction drills given the state of the economy and revenue picture in Washington state. So certainly any reduction in federal funds would only make that hole bigger. I'm sorry, I'm not totally being responsive, but we will definitely happy to sort of follow up on that particular thread. But there's like many different activities happening sort of simultaneously. So want to make sure I get you the right information on that particular question.
Dr. Dahan.
Hi, Jenny. Nice to see you. I wish it were under better circumstances.
I know, I only come bearing bad news usually, I feel like.
So it seems. Well, there was you answered the question I was going to ask in part because we know that you get a variety of different federal funds. My question was whether or not the injunction covered the entitlements as well as the discretionary money.
Yes, so I've essentially opened up. We were given full right and access to all of our federal funds once that injunction went into place, because we were seeing that even on entitlement funds, that freezes on entitlement funds. So I know, for example, that our Medicaid agency could not draw Medicaid that same day, that we were also having trouble drawing any of our funds, regardless if they are discretionary or not. So now that system is completely open. I don't know as this winds its way through the courts how that will be impacted. Also, because obviously I think there is potential for the more discretionary type of grants to be ultimately impacted by an executive order versus the entitlement funding. So that's the other thing that we're looking at is like, which one of ours is through entitlement, which is discretionary. There's a lot of different hybrid sort of options at the federal level, as you know, and so they kind of all of our funds fall into different buckets, and we're looking at that analysis as well.
So do you think the feds intended to stop Title 4E, or do you think it just got caught up in the net?
I'm disinclined to say what the feds intended at this point, but I think part of the problem is that we draw all of our federal funds through one system. It's called like a payment management system, the PMS, and that whole system was shut down. I do not know on the federal side how much they can turn it on for one funding source and turn it off for another. So that would be sort of a technical issue. I don't know if they couldn't do that quickly enough, so they just shut up everything to start with.
If I could just ask one last quick question. Sure. Have there been any changes in Region 10 that you know of?
Not any, not staffing levels that we have heard of in terms of, especially like where a person has been replaced. What we are seeing is definitely questions that we are asking of our federal partners. It's taking a lot longer to get the answers to those questions because I think they're having to do more checking about what is permissible and not. And I have heard we don't deal with the Medicaid side of the house as directly as obviously some of our sister agencies do. And what I've heard from them is that they are definitely seeing that some staff took the buyouts. And so the staff that we would have gone and asked questions of or had technical questions of are not simply not available anymore. So that's the kind of impact that we're seeing in terms of the federal staffing levels.
Thank you.
Jenny, I had a question around Head Start, and we are in, as you well know, and in the middle of the budget crunch for our state, and looking at the bills, unfortunately, to really not roll back, but to maintain and slow way down the work we've been able to do for our smallest learners. And knowing that piece of that is ECAP, our state-funded pre-K program. Also watching and looking at Head Start, and historically Head Start and ECAP together have served not all young people, but it's been a wonderful way for us to work. And you'll find Head Start where ECAP isn't, and ECAP often where Head Start isn't, because the goal was to cooperate and to serve as many families as we could with our programs. So saying all of that, what do you necessarily know or don't know about the funding for Head Start, and what do we need to be thinking about if, in fact, that's a concern and a red flag as well, and what that might mean for the number of young children that would be impacted by now not only our state-funded program, but our federally funded program as well.
Well,
And
I
it's
can tell you
early Head Start early Head Start as well as Head Start.
Yeah, what I can tell you is that that was definitely an area where we kind of saw, almost potentially like an immediate reaction by some of our Head Start providers to the inability to collect funds, because some of them, essentially shutting down their programming that day just to ensure that they were not, continuing to have expenses that they could not actually reimburse their staff for, et cetera. Right. So people were taking some immediate action. I think really it's just been the lack of clarity at this point. And also, again, because that order is essentially still in place and we're all under injunctive relief. We don't know, if as that gets clarified, like there could be pretty immediate impact if there is a decision by the courts, right, that is within the purview of the executive branch at the presidential level, right, to just stop that funding. Mm-hmm. So that one's harder, right, because that's not pass through where we can pay general fund state for some period of time or figure something else out. They're getting paid directly by the feds, and so when that money stops flowing, it stops flowing that day. Right. And there's really not a good way to rescue or to take a better action other than what's happening and playing out in the courts right now. So something, again, we're definitely watching, and we're concerned at this point, again, partly about this access issue in terms of federal payments, but also in terms of what happens when we hit that continuing resolution date, right? And we've been through many, many drills of what happens if we have a federal government shutdown and et cetera. Right. Obviously, that impacts some of these programs as well, dependent on kind of which bucket they're in, per se. But
all right, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So I will, before I leave you guys, I'll throw some links in the chat to sort of additional information to come back to future meetings. Because like I said, this is a very fluid situation that is changing every day. We find out a new piece of information. We couldn't get into the system the other day, and we were, I think it was actually a technical glitch, but we all kind of had a moment of pause because we weren't sure what it meant. So I think everybody is just really trying to figure out, the path forward here with not a lot of information.
Yeah. We still have 5 more of her minutes. So if you've got more questions, please, feel free to ask and wonder aloud. We're not going to keep you on though, Jenny, if there are no questions from the group. Ben, go for it.
So are you aware of any national efforts, Jenny, since the feds fund roughly half of the child welfare systems across the country? Are there national movements, people getting together, trying to sort this out? or is it only the 18 states that have jumped on with the injunctions?
Yeah,
Anything-
mostly what we're seeing right now is just this battle being battled out in court as a question of sort of like what, I think there's obviously we have functioned in a certain way, which is that Congress appropriates funds. That funding flows out obviously with heavy amount of oversight and dictation by our executive branch. And so we haven't really had a situation where those funding, the executive branch has taken this particular stance. And I think it's still really an open question of how that's going to get decided in our court system. I know that obviously our sort of typical, Casey family programs and other, Annie Casey and those types of folks are definitely obviously both watching this and I think have been sort of weighing in to some extent. But right now this is really played out in the courts primarily. And so I think that's where the states have been best positioned because we are demonstrating sort of immediate harm and therefore have, standing in front of the courts on this matter, which I think like the advocacy community doesn't have quite as easy a time potentially being able to show that standing.
Thank you.
Pamela, I see you have a question.
Hi, yes. Jenny, sorry if you went over this already. I had to go and grab my daughter. But my question was in terms for the Working Connections childcare, would funding be affected with that program or how is that going to look?
Yeah, certainly. So Working Connections is funded through a variety of funding sources. Some of that is CCDF funding, Child Care Development Fund, essentially the Block Grant for Childcare. Some of it is in what's called TANF transfer or TANF dollars. And then some of it is state general fund. So that's part of the challenge. We would not, and I know we got some questions from providers when this happened, like, am I going to get paid? So we, again, have some ability to have a little bit of time where we could spend general fund state instead of having those federal dollars. But because those federal dollars are such a big portion of how we pay for childcare, pretty quickly, we would run out of general fund state and we would not be able to, we'd have to take, some kind of drastic action with the program, either significantly reducing that or stopping altogether while we're figuring out what happens with the federal dollars.
Okay. And that makes sense for sure. Sorry. My daughter's in the background. Would that potentially mean that that type of program might have to be on pause or for the foreseeable future? And, I know you might not have the answer right off the bat, but, I do really enjoy that program. And I know a few of my peers in my life are using it. So that was something that was kind of coming over my mind when I was thinking about what these budget cuts and freezes might look like in DCYF.
Well, certainly we're not taking any action on our own. If we actually do see elimination or significant pause on any of our, especially large federal funding sources, that is going to be a conversation that we are having. I'm sure we're not going to be the only entity in that spot. So I think it's going to be a statewide conversation at that point, right? With our governor's office, with our attorney general's office about like what is possible. And then obviously the legislature, I'm sure, will be heavily impacted in trying to figure out what the response is for Washington State in the event of a crisis like that.
Thank you so much, Jenny.
Yeah, absolutely.
Pamela, I would just say also, clearly your experience and your life and your lived experience right now is critically important as we think about not only the federal government, but state as well. So your voice is not only important here and the Oversight Board, but as we think about what we need to do legislatively. So make sure you get connected, and if you need to be connected, circle around. There's a few people on this screen that can really kind of share with you what's going on right now and how it may impact you and how your voice is so important in all the work that we do. So just really appreciative of those questions, because your little one right there is why we're all here. And so you are a great reminder of the work that we need to be doing and are doing every day. So there's no apology needed at all. And just thank you for the reminder of the why of our work. So I just, I think I don't speak just for myself. I see others in this room nodding. So just so appreciative to have you here. Needed to put that out there on the table for you to hear. So thanks.
Well, I
Jenny,
think,
I think,
hopefully,
go ahead.
yeah, hopefully I think I see some of my other DCYF counterparts joining for the next
Yeah.
portion of your meeting. I am also happy to share if people are interested. The declarations that we submitted from DCYF for both of these suits that I put links to the information on. So if you are interested, we can share those because they are now publicly filed. So.
That would be great, I think, and we could put those in the minutes, and perhaps if we send them to Nicholas, then that would be everyone there would then be able to access those. So it's a great way to get the information out. And again, there's the links that are in the chat right now, but that would be awesome to follow up that way, Jenny. Thank you.
I will send to Nicholas. So yes, and thank you for having me and have a good rest
Awesome.
of
Well,
your-
thanks for being
Yep.
here on a Friday night. Hopefully you have a weekend ahead of you. So thank
Well,
you.
I'm better off than my other DCYF compatriots who are going to really enjoy spending their Friday night with you guys. So I told Frank I was getting the early spot. So
Thank you. Top billing. There we go.
yes,
There you
Thanks
go.
a lot, Jenny.
We'll bring
absolutely.
it home.
All right. So we are like so timely. We're a few minutes, 2 minutes early, and that's always a good sign. So next up, we had in our conversations as a board talked about making child welfare workforce wellness kind of a focus for 2025. And so I want to welcome, I see Frank in the room, Frank Ordway, who is the Deputy Secretary of Operations, and Doreen Perez, who is the deputy, it's Friday night, Assistant Secretary of Child Welfare for DCYF, and are going to kind of talk a little bit about the findings from the 2024 statewide employee engagement survey, and really just talk a little bit more about from where we're going to launch and where you're going to launch from the survey results. So with that, I think I'm just going to pass it over to the two of you. Thanks for being
Great.
here.
Of course, we're so pleased to be here. It's a pleasure to be here with you, Chair Wilson, and all the members of the committee. And we are deeply thankful for this focus because the state of mind, the health of our employees is critical to how they show up for families. And so we appreciate you understanding and seeing that connection and looking forward to the conversation tonight. I believe we might have one other panelist with us. I don't know, Nicholas, if you see Richard Gobble here, but if he's here, he's from our HR team. He can join the conversation. Okay, just a little late addition to the team, Chair Wilson, and so Richard Gobble from our HR team will be joining the conversation and help us get through this here tonight. So with that, I will go ahead and share my screen. I will dare to do so and see if this works. Does that come through for everybody? Are you seeing the presentation?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. So look forward. We're going to be talking tonight about the DCYF Employment Engagement Survey. We are going to be focusing specifically on the results for the child welfare workforce. But of course, the survey was administered to all of our staff, and so there may be some references and stats in here that reflect that, and we'll make sure to point that out as we get through it. In addition to the survey, and so Chair Wilson, you noted at the introduction here that one of the focuses of the board, a primary focus of the board, was the health and wellness of our staff and in particular of our case carrying staff. And so we're going to get to the survey results and have a healthy conversation, but we also wanted to just take a moment, maybe for future consideration in terms of agenda items, and just touch on some of the other areas of focus that we have going on right now that are also in this same arena. So with your indulgence, we have 2 years ago, we established a staff wellness table, and this is sort of the center of gravity for safety and wellness initiatives in the agency. And it has a wide range of responsibilities, but some of the highlights has been standing up a full mental health service array for our staff. We have access through contracts and through internal staff to mental health supports for our staff after traumatic incidents or just if they need it in general. We have a professional resiliency team that goes on site to locations after critical incidents to support staff on site. And that has been a huge boon to the staff that go through a lot on the ground, both in child welfare and in our JR facilities. We have a host of generalized wellness programs. These are not things that we had when we were created as an agency, and so we've been building those out, and I'm happy to share details on that in a future meeting. And then we have a host of safety initiatives across the agency focused on, auditing buildings, auditing, crime conditions in the neighborhood where our staff work, those kinds of things, trying to make sure that we're doing all we can to be proactive for their safety. We have an internal safety audit team that go and visit field offices around the state every year with a host of questions. And so we're trying to make sure that we're not, that we're covering all of our bases as an agency, looking at our safety profile, risk profile across the state and all of our offices. We have deep partnerships with DSHS and other agencies that we co-locate with in terms of sharing the security load and the safety load for our staff. We manage our fleet. We have a really set of unique challenges for the staff that do use the state cars from service of safety of the children and families that we serve. Puts them in a lot of unique conditions, whether it's weather conditions, long roads, long trips, or other issues that are directly impact our staff. And we work very closely with DES to manage our fleet for what our staff need to do their job and to keep the kids that they transport safe. And we're currently in negotiations that we are excited about and hope to be able to bring to successful resolution with WFC and OFM around our ability to provide an assignment that allows staff who've been involved in a critical incident some time to collect themselves and not have to come right back to work the next day. And we're in fierce agreement with our union on this one. And so we hope to get that one across the finish line. And then there's also a broader set of negotiations that are currently going on about staff assaults and safety in all institutions that we're involved with WFC as well. So those are just some of the non-survey highlights of things that we're working on related to staff safety. And so now we will go ahead and turn to the other staff engagement work that we are up to. We have a wide range of work, and of course, it's always in progress. We're always looking to improve our efforts, and the survey is a good measuring tool as to whether or not these staff engagement things here are working or not. There's an effort called Appreciative Inquiry, where we are working across the agency to gather information from our frontline staff about what's working, what they enjoy about their jobs, what's helping them stay, and really trying to build off of those assets and positives and making sure that we understand what's working for our staff as well as what might not be working. We have our regular, as required by our CBAs, our UMCCs, which is our communication committees, which are held across the state every single month, tables across the state, both at a regional, division, and statewide level with our union partners. We have field advisory boards where staff are able to come and talk about the conditions in their regions. And if they can't resolve those issues in the regions, then that stuff bubbles up to the statewide leadership of child welfare. Wide variety of team meetings, all staff events, and our annual leadership summit, where we look at the results of all of this work and reflect on how we can be better leaders and a better employer for the staff that do such hard work for our agency. And of course, we do surveys. And with that, Richard Gobble, please come in, introduce yourself. You were introduced. Make sure that you introduce yourself. And why don't you talk a little bit about the methodology and the approach to our survey work.
Thank you, Frank. Good evening, board members. I just echo what Frank is saying. It's a privilege to be in your midst this evening, and happy Friday. I asked Frank if he'd be open to I actually asked to join this meeting. I'm interested in the work that you do. And also the employee engagement survey is a special focus that I'm involved in. So I thought if I could help support, provide answers, I'm got a pretty steep learning curve right now, to be honest, because I'm learning more about survey management and so forth. This is a fairly new role for me, but I just look forward to the conversation. And I also want to echo what he said about our appreciation and gratitude to you for being interested in employee wellness. When he approached me and said that the board was interested in looking at our survey results. I thought, that is just fantastic. So thank you for your interest. As far as just an overall introduction to the employee engagement survey, it's been something that's been in play for almost 20 years, as you see there on the slide notes, since 2006. It's not something that is initially and broadly administered by DCYF specifically. It's something that goes out to all state agencies, and it's administered by the Office of Financial Management. And so they're the ones that determine when and how often, and the core content of each of the surveys that are done on an annual basis. Our cadence is every October. And for us, particularly because we're a newer agency, we don't have the in-house expertise or capacity to actually administer this and do the important data analysis. You know, it's not only enough to get the survey out there, but it's really important that we have a credible process for reviewing and analyzing the results. So, you know, we know that what the data that we're looking at is, is an accurate expression of what the employees are really thinking. And so the Research Data Analysis Division does that on our behalf, at least in 2024, dating back to 2018. And they've been really a fantastic team to work with, really very credible team of subject matter experts. The majority of the questions in the survey are on, you may be familiar with survey lingo there. It's on what is referred to as a Likert scale. And the language is anywhere from strongly agree all the way, as you can see, sliding to the right to strongly disagree. And so it's really great that it's not just a yes or no, but we really have a chance to get a sense of the feel for how strongly they respond to any particular question. And we'll show you when we actually start looking at the numbers, how that can help us, just give us another layer of understanding in what our workforce is thinking. And so when you look at the percentage scores, you'll see them in just a moment, the percentages based on those that provide either a strongly agree or agree response. Yeah. So yes, Frank, let's go ahead. Any questions so far just about the survey in general? Okay. So you were interested in looking specifically at the child welfare portion of the engagement results, and with with understandable reason. So this year we had just over 1,000 of our 1,000 child welfare workforce members participate in the survey, and as you can see there, that represented 43% of our workforce. It'd be legitimate to ask the question, well, gee, should we even have a further conversation on this? Because man, that's less than half of the people, that actually show up and inside of child welfare for work every day. And I'm able to confidently tell you, yes, the data that we're going to take a look at in terms of a statistically viable sample, we're in good shape. Last year, in 2023, we were doing some leadership development work at DCYF, and we retained an outside vendor to come and survey all employees to inquire, just to ask some questions about what was important to them in the leadership, the leadership that DCYF was providing. And we are hoping for a really robust response. We got about 700 responses out of a workforce of about 5,500-ish people. And my heart sank when I saw that. And so I went back to our contracted folks that were administering the survey on our behalf. We said, again, can we even go any further? And they said, oh, yeah. And I can't remember what they said was a statistically viable sample. Forgive me, that data point escapes me, but they said you are in really good shape. And what research has shown, once you're over that minimal amount, which was actually way less than 10%, even 700, they say you're in good shape. They said as those numbers grow, what those larger numbers do is verify. They just demonstrate the veracity of what the smaller sample shows. So we feel confident that in working with 43% response rate, we're more than adequate. So yeah, Frank, again, any questions or comments so far? All right, let's just go ahead and dive in. I asked Frank if I could just offer a comment on this first slide for a couple of reasons. One, this is the first slide, we're actually seeing numbers, right? And I want to draw your attention to, there's 5 columns before you see the percentage response all the way over on the right-hand side. And the reason why we're highlighting the numbers in red, what that represents is and not only in this slide, but the slides that you'll see that will follow, is that represents the largest single response column for that particular question. For instance, question 16, 503 people, that by almost a margin of 2 to 1 or so, largely, set a strongly agreed response as opposed to the next column at 292. So that tells us, if we had a really strong number in that neither agree or disagree column, that also gives us some insights that are really worth a good strong look and consideration in terms of where we might want to focus our efforts in responding to the data that we're seeing. So I just want to make sure that you were aware of that. So on this first slide, if I could, I'd just like to give a shout out to the supervision, particularly the immediate supervisors for the Child Welfare Division. This is where, not only for the Child Welfare Division, but across DCYF, we're thankful to say that this was the largest single category of questions where we got the highest response rate. And if we're going to score high anywhere, I think it's easy to say that this is if we had to choose just one, this is what it would be for us, because supervisors do so much to create the culture and environment for the setting in which our employees operate and work every day. And to see that these kind of marks in terms of how they feel about their immediate supervision is just really, really gratifying.
Thank you, Richard. I really appreciate the framing of the work and standing by if anybody has any questions about the survey. I'd like to invite Doreen Perez to talk a little bit about the focus that child welfare leadership has, and also see a question, please. Leonard.
Oh, thank you very much. Hey, does this include JR25 working folks as well?
We have survey results for them, sir, but tonight we were asked to focus on child welfare specifically. So these stats are isolated to that part of our workforce. Happy to provide you with the data and we have that is specific to that division.
I'd really like to see that. Thank you.
You bet. We'll distribute it to the whole board. Ben.
Frank, how are you?
I am good, sir. Good to see you. Long time.
You as well. It has been a while. I'm just kind of curious that we're talking about a response rate about 4 out of every 10 workers or so, and I understand the challenges with getting high response rates. But I was wondering, of the numbers in red that we're looking at, how many of them would you guess are actually representing case carrying folks? Because you've got so many different roles and responsibilities within the agency, everything from processing paperwork. I don't have to tell you all the different categories of workers that you have. Is there any way of sorting out how many of the people are responding about their supervision are case carrying? And that would be true of many of the other questions as well.
Fair enough. Richard, I'm not sure if
yes.
Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that question forward. I wish that I could answer yes in response to that question, but unfortunately, we do not have the capacity in the survey to call out those that are only case carrying. There are a number of demographic related questions that we ask, so we can do drill downs. We do drill downs by, this is all of child welfare, right? We do drill downs by region. So we can take a look at regions 1 through 6 and see what their specific data is telling us. We can do it even by office, but unfortunately, we're unable to do it by job class.
One last question. I'm assuming that the survey is anonymous, right?
Yes.
There's no way of identifying respondents.
No, there is no way. That is actually one of the there's two key reasons that tend to lower survey response rates for surveys of this type. According to the research and data analysis people over at DSHS that, again, managed our survey on our behalf. Then the highest single factor is the fear of being singled out. It's the concern about anonymity. And I am really happy to say that the state as a whole, and then RDA in particular, even take it further in really making it, really taking pains to make sure that the data that we get, we cannot identify who the contributors. As one example, I mentioned that we offer reports, say, per office, like the Wenatchee office in Region 2. But if we have less than 10 respondents in the Wenatchee office, then we don't get a report for Wenatchee. And we don't have any access to the raw data. All we have is the access is the data that we're showing you tonight. So.
Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Appreciate it. Doreen, I'd like to come back to you and just have you reflect on the work that child welfare leadership is doing in support of supervisors, as well as all of the staff in the field. And if you have any responses to the question that Ben asked in terms of splits of staff and that sort of thing, happy to have you weigh in on those as well.
Thank you, Frank, and thank you for having me here. I want to first extend apologies for Assistant Secretary Natalie Green not being able to be here. She had a pre-arranged engagement that she wasn't able to get out of, and so that was fortunate. That allowed me to be here, but I wanted to extend her apologies for not being able to be here in person or virtually herself. And Mr. DeHaan, part of an answer to your question is that the majority of our staff in child welfare are case carrying. And so even though we can't drill this down to exactly which ones were responding to this survey, the majority of the staff in child welfare are, because your question was a bit more global to the entire organization, but within child welfare specific, and that's what these detailed answers or percentages are coming from, is case carrying staff. And I want to talk a little bit about our child welfare division. Under Natalie Green's leadership, we have set specific goals. And one of those is ensuring that our organization of child welfare is a learning environment. And with that, she has supported each of the regions in developing what is specific to their needs in their sections for their teams. And every single region has stepped into that space. Many of them have established their own supervisory trainings. Each of them have supervisory meetings. And Region 2 in particular has taken that learning environment a step further and is offering and has established a mentoring program in order to support the future leaders of that region. And that's a pretty amazing thing. And the other regions are looking at that very closely and are interested in doing something similar in their sections. Child welfare also has the facilities, the placement exception facilities within our division, and we have 3 of those. And that is also something that was born out of our desire to ensure that our staff are going to be safe when having to care for these dysregulated youth who don't have a permanent placement or any placement options. And we were previously having to house these in either a hotel, sometimes in offices. And establishing the facilities allowed for stability for those youth so that they can have a consistent environment, consistent caregivers, and consistent schedules. And this has allowed all of these youth eventually to be able to be stable enough and to be able to receive a placement. A lot of times before they can get there, because they are dealing with their own trauma, they're so dysregulated that they're just dangerous themselves. And our staff are trained in verbal craft. And that's one of the items that our division took on to ensure that our staff had the skills to take care of any of these types of situations where there were behaviors that were causing either a youth or other individuals to be in a place where they could either harm themselves or others. And verbal craft training is, we've gotten feedback from all of our teams. This has been provided to the facilities teams, our after hours teams as priority, and even our clerical teams, because it emphasizes de-escalation skills, verbal de-escalation skills without having to move into anything more physical. And all teams that have taken this, we hear nothing more than this is the best training we've ever had. And that's why we have, we put in a request to the legislature to be able to have internally our own trainers so that we can keep that going for our workforce on an ongoing basis. Because as good as the training is, that they always need those refreshers, and we always are going to have new staff that are going to need that. Let's see here. What else do I want to share with you guys? Also, as a result of the facilities, we had a dramatic decrease in youth that are placed in these placement exceptions, to the point where the census now is anywhere from 4 to 7 for the last 4 to 5 months. Previous to that, when we were first experiencing this, we had multiple youth in different places across the state. These facilities are in King County, and 2 of them are in Region 6. I want to kind of talk a little bit about why these responses by the staff who took the survey are so incredibly meaningful to us, because they reflect that our staff believe that they are being treated incredibly well by their supervisors, that they are supported, and that they are being treated with respect, and are supported in having a work-life balance. Because the supervisor's job is one of the hardest jobs in child welfare's organization. They are responsible for not only hiring and onboarding those new staff and ensuring that they are going through the training plan necessary to be effective in the field. They are also filling in whenever there are vacancies, whenever staff are out on extended leave, and ensuring that all that oversight is happening. They are involved in every single staffing that happens for a family, whether that is a safe child consult, whether that is a family team decision-making meeting, or that's a shared planning meeting, or any ad hoc types. They are also providing monthly clinical supervision to each of their team members for every single case on their caseload. That is a lot of work, and through all of that, our team members feel supported, and they are feeling encouraged by their direct supervisors. And for child welfare, that is incredibly meaningful, because that is exactly where our first line of ensuring that retention of our staff happens, and ensuring that the quality of the casework is happening. So we are very pleased with these results. Does anybody have any questions so far? Katie.
Thank you. I was just curious how the survey was administered and kind of the ease of responding. I know sometimes if a survey if it's really difficult to go in and input your answers, you'll kind of skew towards the people who have really strong opinions, and the middle people will be like, this is just too hard to do. And so just kind of curious about that.
I'll have to defer to Richard for that question.
Yeah, the survey was administered online for actually it was available online for the entire workforce. We tried to do some extra measures to reach out to people inside the juvenile rehabilitation space because they're in a 24/7 facility. They don't have ready access to a computer and so forth. But for the majority of the workforce, they do have access to a computer. And so the survey was open for 3 weeks. And so it wasn't just like we left it up for a week and, grab it while it's up there sort of a thing, because we recognize, particularly in the child welfare space, like Doreen was speaking to, there's such there's so much work, and it's always coming in. There's timelines that have to be met, right? And responding to the calls that come in and so forth. So we want to give people an adequate chance to be able to jump in. In order to encourage participation, I didn't speak to this earlier, and there was at least one board member had some question about it during our preparation phase. We do a fairly extensive heads up to employees. through our major agency communication modes. And we also really encourage all the supervisors. I sent out communications to all of the regional administrators and the other leaders within child welfare, including other division leaders, and even provided, we provided sample language that they could use to communicate out. So it's not just coming from DCYF writ large, but they're actually hearing from their divisional or regional leaders, and even hopefully trickling down to their individual supervisors. So we try and come at it at multiple ways, and we continue that communication all the way through. The survey is open. We provide weekly updates to, in this instance, all the regional administrators, so they can get a sense of how their people are responding. And we provide ongoing communication samples to them that they can send out and so forth. And then, I think that pretty well covers the communication piece. Does that answer your question, Katie?
Yes, thank you.
Diana?
Hi, yes, I was wondering about the supervisors themselves. So I'm assuming they also have been allowed to take this survey, and although you couldn't differentiate between case carrying folks, do you have any sense of whether the supervisors themselves are facing some burnout issues? I mean, just the litany of what they have to do on a day-to-day basis was pretty impressive.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Richard.
You want me to go ahead? Sure. Yes, actually, that is a differentiation we can make. In one of those demographic questions that we ask as part of the survey is, do you supervise anyone? And so we can pull out that supervisory, whoever answered yes to that question. Forgive me, I did not come prepared tonight to, or I should say, we didn't come prepared to provide that information, but we can provide that for you if you're interested. I think we should be able. I'd have to go back to RDA. We don't have at the ready what child welfare supervisors' response rates look like, but we could potentially ask for that from RDA if there's sufficient interest.
And I think, Diane, we might see in some of these upcoming slides when people are talking about headquarters and other leadership, but you might see both commentary about folks like me at the headquarters, but also people above the supervisor, depending on what they think leadership means in a survey like this. So I think you might see some of those sentiments perhaps here shortly. We'll get back to this. We'll get back to the survey. Let's go on to the next slide here from quality of supervision. And what we have here are other areas indicating positive engagement. Is the share screen back up? Sorry, I'm just tracking. Just making sure. Thank you. I appreciate it. And these were other areas that we would just like to share with you. I'm not going to read through all of them to you all. I trust your ability to do so. But I'll just leave the screen up here for a second. And both Richard and Doreen, if there are things about this slide that you want to touch on specifically, the mic, of course, is open to you.
I think it's worth commenting on question 24. I'm satisfied with my telework and remote work opportunities. Doreen could speak to this more credibly than I could because it predates my engagement with DCYF. But for some time, in past years, there'd been a sense of a real honest question, like, I don't know, can the child welfare, or at least case carrying workforce really, do telework? Is that a viable option? And COVID really forced us into that space and it showed us that, yes, at least with some measure of success, it can happen. So it's good to see that rate, 72 is not a super high score, but it's certainly a very credible score. And you see here that the largest response rate is in the strongly agree column. So that's telling us that there's a number of our workforce that are child welfare workforce that are really pleased with their telework opportunities.
Thank you, Richard. I also would just like to emphasize the question 29. I find meaning in my work. One of the areas that we have been looking at also within child welfare is just our recruitment and retention efforts. And there are two things that we are finding in our workforce is that ensures that they're going to stay. And if we can keep staff to stay at least through the first 2 years, and that's data that's available to us from the National Center for Safety Partnership, is that they are likely to stay much longer than that. And so that's where our focus has been, is really working on that. And that is, they have a strong connection to their supervisor and they find meaning in their work. Where we find staff leaving whenever we do exit surveys, that's typically the reason why they are leaving, is that they are not finding meaning in their work. They say to us, it is not what I thought it was going to be. And so that's one of the areas where the workforce that we do have and the longevity of the workforce, they have incredible meaning in their work.
Thank you, Doreen. So some of our more painful, or I guess, or places that we are doing some deeper dives, both as a leadership team and as leader groups throughout the agency, are reflected in these results. We are an agency that has change is constant for us, and we should be better at managing it. And these numbers should be better because it's constant, because we are always both driving our own improvement, but of course, court rulings, legislative sessions always have federal budget crises. All these things have impacts on our agency's operations. So we are, over the last 5 years, been in an almost constant state of flux in those regards. So this is an area that we are delving more into. We're doing additional survey work about what staff actually mean, what they actually need when it comes to organizational change, because in our line of work, it's the one thing we can count on is that change is coming and that other things are likely to be impacting the nature of our work. So this is an area that we are, these are some of the areas that we have a lot of concern about. Yes, April.
Yeah, I just had a question about that last question. Why are the numbers of responses so much lower than the rest of the responses?
That's a really interesting question. Richard, I don't know what the data vagaries are in terms of response rates across all of the questions. Do you recall if this question was one of the lower response rates overall, or yeah, do you have any insight into April's question?
Yeah, the thing about doing surveys is we ask questions that prompt questions. We almost all the way down the survey, especially where the scores are lower, we're asking, why? I wonder what people are thinking, why they chose this kind of response. And of course, we could guess all day long, but the only way to know is to go back to Frank's point, is to go back and ask more questions. To ask specifically, can you give us examples of times when you didn't receive information and communication that negatively impacted the ability to do your job effectively? Can you give us examples of some concrete actions that might actually cause you to strongly agree in response to a question like that? But there's no way that we can know unless we went back and actually asked. So I'm sorry, we don't have further insights there. Again, we could guess and postulate, but we wouldn't know until we really asked the questions.
Pamela, I believe your hand was up before Bobby's, or maybe I got that backwards. Sorry if I did.
Bobby, if you'd like to share first, I'm just collecting my thoughts on how I'm going to present my question.
Hey, Bobby, you're on mute.
I think I would have learned that by now.
Do it every day.
Yeah, I think April was asking a different question, or at least I heard a different question than the answer, and that was, this is a remarkably much lower number of respondents altogether than we had from the earlier questions, and so that seems to me, in and of itself, a little kind of problematic.
Forgive me, April. Yes, so I can answer that question. Thank you for clarifying that, Bobby. One of the things that I consider to be a strength of the way that the state administrates the employee engagement survey is that people are not, once I, get into the survey, I'm not obligated to answer every single question in order to work my way to the end. I can choose and select to answer what questions I want to, and which ones I can skip any ones that I prefer not to. So it's real evident here that a lot of our child welfare workforce elected not to answer this question. And again, we wouldn't know why without probing more deeply. Does that hit the mark, April?
Pamela, do you want another moment to gather before I go to Ben?
No, I got it. So with that thought of is it possible for further surveys to add that part where you can add commentary? I know like when I do my surveys for DCYF, like the ETV funding, it is such when I go through it and it adds the part where it's like you can add commentary. I think it adds more meaning behind my responses, and it really allows the ETV workers to accommodate with my concerns. And so like seeing that where like what April was bringing up with the questions of why some weren't answered, maybe some might not, like they may not choose not to answer and then put their reasoning why. So I was just kind of wondering if like for future, could that be a possibility of ensuring that those comments are added?
Yeah.
So if there are questions.
Yes, I think Pamela, you're asking, do we have the option of, like, after question 7, can we say, do you want to give us any more information about this, or give us more, where there's basically an open-ended question, right? This year, we did not have the option of providing any open-ended questions. Whenever forgive me if I'm saying something that's already obvious, but whenever it comes to providing open-ended questions, it's a wonderful way to really drill down, and it's just where a person can say whatever they want, right? The challenge in offering open-ended questions is that it really exponentially complicates the data analysis. It really takes significantly a lot more time and resources to really do that well. You've got to have multiple players. There's coding involved. There's quite a bit to it, and that was an option that was not an option for us this year as far as RDAs. When that was part of our contract. We could do it every other year, but not this year.
Thank you for answering that.
Ben, back to you, sir.
So as I was reading through the survey, I was thinking all along, okay, we're now talking about 4 out of 10, roughly 4 out of 10 people responding to this. And I was kind of wondering, okay, well, how representative is that? But now it occurs to me that on some of the more critical questions, we could have a response rate that's much lower than that. So how do you qualify as being in the 4 out of 10? How many do you have to answer in order to be truly a respondent? Am I making sense, Frank?
Yeah. So I think if I just go in and answer one question, am I considered a full respondent or not?
Yeah.
We need some statistical and as Richard said before, and I'll get it back to him, the individual respondents pick and choose what they want, but I don't know, I can't answer authoritatively what RDA's consideration of that might be in terms of how we might interpret this data. I don't know if Richard, did that question resonate with you?
It does resonate with me, but not one, unfortunately, for which I have an answer. I don't know. But for any questions, I'm happy to we still have a live connection with RDA. And so I'm happy to inquire back, and that should be information that's easily obtainable.
Yeah. Well, and I also think, Diane, and I'm coming to you. I think, Ben, it's also one of the reasons that we do a lot of other things to try to gauge and be engaged with our staff, because the surveys are inexact. It's a 3-week time window and all of that. So we are trying to leverage this information as best we can, but we're also not holding it as sort of sacrosanct in its nature, because it is imperfect. And as you can see, it may not reflect even the majority of the sentiment of some of the staff.
Well, with all the other things you have to do, I need to commend you for taking the time to do this. I mean, it's complicated work, and you're right, it is inexact. I'm just trying to get a handle on
No, it's
ways.
good questions. Yeah. And I'll be honest, post-pan, when we started to stabilize as an agency, because the pandemic hit when we were in our infancy, we had just been fully formed just before it hit. And after surviving that, the focus on culture, the focus on, there was a lot of events during that time that really crystallized the reality of what our staff go through. And as an agency, I'm sure that many in child welfare knew that before, but as DCYF, it was a conscious raising moment in terms of really being intentional about focusing on the wellness and safety of the staff. And I think a lot of the cases at the Supreme Court and legislation that's been passed has been pointing us in a specific direction about how we're supposed to show up for families. And so really thinking consciously about how our staff, how we support them so they can show up for those families the way we want them to is inherent in this. And so I think we're still getting started in how we really apply these waters, but we're trying to be as intentional as possible. Diane.
I am struck by the importance of a sort of a comparison group, if you would. Like in this particular slide, you have all DCYF as well as child welfare, which I find helpful because it gets you the sense of, is this an outlier? And I wondered what your thoughts were about just sort of comparison data. I suspect that you kind of are following this. This is a yearly survey, so you're probably over time. I'm also
We would love
wondering,
to, but they change the questions a lot. So
oh, did they?
sometimes it makes some of the true trends. I mean, I think, Diane, you can infer certainly, even though there's a word change, but it does make year to year somewhat difficult because it's not always the same questions year after year.
Okay, well then, but going forward, are they planning to keep it mostly the same, or?
Richard, I don't know if you can speak authoritatively to that, given that we don't.
We do try and keep the changes to a minimum for the reasons that, to give us a chance to do that trending work. I heard from our subject matter experts in the Office of Innovation, Accounting, Alignment, and Accountability. They said that it takes 7 years to actually establish a trend, 7 years worth of data. It's like, whoa. So we try and keep our monkeying with it really to a minimum. There was something.
Can I just insert just another quick little part about the comparison? Do you look at other state agencies to see kind of where DCYF lines up compared to, say, a different state agency?
Yes, we can do that. On the OFM website, there is a spot that's pretty cool. It's an interactive engagement survey data visualization tool where you can filter for by agency, and I can't remember what the various points of filtering are there, but you can take a look at and see how DCYF lines up with Department of Corrections or L&I or all across there. You can't. I don't know there's a way to actually line them up and see them in the same, in the same space. But you can you can filter for L&I, then you can filter for DCYF, and so on and so forth. I will get the link to that and provide. And
I was just going to say, send it to Nicholas, and he can distribute it to the members.
Okay.
Okay. Well, I'm getting back, just being mindful of time. We've got a couple of other slides we want to share, and but really excellent conversation. And we do have some level, we do engage with RDA. We do provide feedback on both the methodology, the questions, and those kinds of things. So this is super helpful. These are just some other noteworthy data points in the survey that we are working on responses to, but also things that we are trying to do our best to follow up on and understand what their meaning is from our staff. Ensuring that we are an agency that reflects the communities in which we serve is key to our ability to accomplish our mission. If our staff, if people who are seeking to work with us don't feel welcome, if they don't feel that they're part of the picture, we're doing something demonstrably wrong. Our mission as DCYF is clear in how we are supposed to be supporting families staying together. And part of that inherently is taking on systemic racism. And if you do not have a comfort level working here, if you do not feel welcome, we're not doing our jobs correctly. And so there's some work that we need to do in this arena, and we're quite dedicated to doing it. And so we are really taking these numbers seriously. And we are an agency that is, we look at our diversity numbers, and we're happy to share those in a presentation if you would like, as our workforce. And I think it's a good baseline to have as we go forward. This is an arena that we are deeply committed to. And this is an area that I also think contributes to a clear sense of mission, which contributes to wellness and certainty in our staff. And as we go forward in this conversation with you all, this is one of those baselines. I know you would, but I'd like, just as a leader of the agency, to ask you to hold us accountable in this arena as strongly as you can. It's a critical part of our ability to deliver the services in the way that we want to the families of Washington State. I don't know if you have any questions or thoughts, Richard, on this particular data, or Doreen, or if there's any questions from the panel members. Okay.
I see Anna's got her hand up.
Oh, thank you, Senator. Anna, please.
Yeah. In this survey, is there a way to see what the makeup is, the diversity in the people who are answering these questions? I mean,
Yes, great question. Go ahead, Richard, please.
Yes, there is. I'm sorry, Frank. I didn't want to jump in front of you there. That's also one of the demographic questions that we ask is, people can provide their gender and identity preferences, their racial background and context. I think I try to remember if there's an age-related question. I can't recall for certain. No, we don't have, and we did receive a report from RDA that is related to that demographic breakdown, but we don't, we don't have access to the demographic details themselves. Again, that's part that RDA just doesn't share with us.
Okay, thank you. I was just curious. I would answer it differently because of maybe my experience with it. So I'm just kind of curious how the makeup was in this, like how many people of color were actually answered this, or, was the majority of them, a certain race that, would sway just the experience.
You can say white, Anna. It's okay. And so it's a great question. And Richard, I think as part of the follow-up, just as a general piece of information, we should share the demographic breakdowns that we have of our staff in general, so I think there's just some things, Anna, so you can get, it may not tell us who answered these questions, I understand, but give you a sense of who we are and currently as an agency. And it's also in the staff that have expressed reticence to answer questions sometimes on the survey because they don't necessarily trust the anonymity, also are reticent at times to express their ethnic background or race because they're worried about being identified within the groups that they are in. And so there's a chilling effect there that we are listening to and working with our race, equity, and social justice teams across the agency to continue to listen to think about how we can ensure that we're still getting feedback that we need, but not exacerbating people's concerns about being singled out. Couple of other points of interest that we are both focusing on and celebrating to a degree are these numbers. Our agency does really hard work, and it does hard work every day in every county across the state, and the families that we serve deserve the best of us. And the fact that so many of our staff find meaning in this work and the way in which, and I think this is an important number to reflect on, because we have had to change, not had to change, excuse me, that's a poor choice of words. We have changed our practice as an agency over the last 5 years. We have the lowest number of kids in out-of-home care in the history of the state and the history of data being collected. We have the highest concentration of kin placements that we've ever had as a state, and the concentration of them being licensed, therefore receiving services and support, goes up every day. I think that helps our staff, in particular the staff that are reflected in this part of the survey, do find meaning in their work, because people go into social work to help families stay together. And I think that our mission is getting closer to meeting what those folks were looking for when they actually came to work at DCYF. And so these are incredibly high numbers, I think, for the difficulty of the work that our staff do every day. I'm sure these come as a surprise. I want to touch on workload in particular, given the survey focus here. I just mentioned the fact that the caseload for this agency is at historic lows. And I'm deeply proud of the work that we have collectively done to accomplish that, because I think we're doing it safely, and it reduces disruption and unnecessary separation from families that can result in just so much lifelong trauma. So I'm very proud of the fact that we are where we are. The cases that we have not necessarily gotten more complicated, but the work that we have to do on each one has indeed gotten more complicated. The time frames in which we have to deliver certain things, the pressure that staff are under on each case is high. And so the caseload is down, the workload is not. And so I just want to make sure that while I think anybody in just about any job would probably ask to work less, I want to in particular reflect on that number.
Frank, if I could say something
Please.
to this as well. And
course.
I just wanted to clarify that the CFWS, our Child and Family Welfare Service caseloads, are the ones that have gone down. Those are the workers who carry the foster care placements. Children who are either in out-of-home care or have been reunited on a trial return home to their parent. But our Child Protective Services investigations and FAR cases have not. Our intake rate has gone back to the pre-pandemic levels, and it is that's something that we continue to see fluctuate. And as far not dramatic fluctuations anymore like we had with the pandemic, but it is back to that level. There's been significant increases in the need to have cases assigned for investigation. And Frank is right. There is the way we have been funded in the past is based on caseload. It is not based on workload. Our workload has increased dramatically for every program that is a case carrying, whether it is intake, whether it is Child Protective Services investigations or family assessment response, voluntary services, even adoptions. There's a significant increase in the workload. And at the end of last year, our agency was required to provide a report to the legislature at that, and that was done, our workload analysis. And it was an incredible report that really focused in on the number of hours an individual social worker can be expected to provide on a case. And that funding is that is the approach that we are trying to move towards, is that this is a workload staffing model and not just a caseload staffing model.
Thank you, Doreen. I want to touch on number 4 before moving on real quick. This is a area of distinct focus for us. At the bottom, if you will, of the pandemic, when our staffing levels were incredibly low, we started looking at all sorts of things that we needed to do as an agency to be a better employer. And one of those areas that we wanted to make sure that we tried to offer every staff, whether you were coming in as a caseworker or a finance person or a cook, it didn't matter where you were joining this agency, that we wanted to give you an arc for development and professional opportunity. And one of the areas that our child welfare staff had been advocating for some time was the opportunity to earn clock hours for their licensure while working at DCYF and not have to do it after hours or otherwise. And we were able to work collaboratively with our staff and with all the bodies that are necessary to establish this program. And we are now supporting the pursuit of licensure for our staff so they can become licensed social, what's the word I'm looking for, Doreen? Licensed
Clinical social workers.
clinical social workers,
Licensed
excuse
clinical
me.
social workers.
Thank you very much. And so we're happy to be supporting that. And again, that's one of those numbers that as you all and your work on the board can continue to check in with us on these numbers in the future. We would hope that that career advancement number improves because we are doing some very intentional work across the agency, but in particular in child welfare on supporting career advancement for our staff. Just a couple of notes as we close out the presentation of things that we are working on that I think are important elements of staff wellness and safety. So I can let those things sit on their own if you have any questions. But we're really focusing on that reduced turnover number, of course. Lot of cost to the taxpayer for turnover, just the processing and the just it's a wasteful cycle. And so the fewer turnover we have, the more efficient we are being. And ultimately, of course, we hope that that leads to better practice and so better work with the families in which we are serving, which also is not only a huge retention area, but it's a huge risk mitigation thing for our agency and for the state. And so we're really focused on that turnover number as we go forward, and we have been for the last couple of years. And we're happy with the progress we're making, but we are not celebrating these numbers just yet.
So, Frank, this is Rep Dentier. I don't have a hand to raise.
Hello, sir. How are you?
Hey, I'm good. Good to see you. I haven't seen you for a long time.
You too, sir. I'm glad you're well.
Yeah. Anyway, on that number 4, reduced turnover, that's a pretty good number there. So are we still trending down or we won't know for a while?
We are. And I don't know, Doreen, if you want to reflect on some of the numbers, but we've got regions that are already below the 16%. And so we are, and that's both in child welfare and across our agencies. So these are things that we are, we're excited about where we're going because we've been putting a lot of effort into this thing in particular. As Doreen also mentioned earlier in her presentation, that first 2 years experience is really a key time frame. And so the more people we can keep, the better their practices, the better the better it is for the families of Washington. I don't know if Doreen, if you want to reflect on these numbers at all.
I would love to reflect on these numbers because we do see a significantly lower percentage in some of the regions. The region's percentage for vacancy fluctuates anywhere from 6% up to 20% in some of the offices. And those are offices that are in areas that are incredibly hard to maintain staffing for a variety of factors. 2 of those offices are in King County and one of them is in Pierce County. And so just the cost of living and the public sector, or pardon me, the private sector, it's hard to maintain that. But even in those offices, their vacancy rate has come down dramatically. They are not only hiring quality staff, because what we were facing at it for a period of time was we could not hire anybody who qualified because we weren't getting those candidates applying for our social service specialist 3 category, which is the highest tier before you become a lead worker or a supervisor, and they are able to carry a full caseload. So we were in the position of hiring social worker 1s and growing our own, if you will. And through that process, we were able to retain quite a few workers. They have moved into those positions. They're staying longer, and word is spread amongst those individuals and their circles. And we have had a significant increase in recruitment of people who qualify at the 3 level, and we're bringing those on, and they are able to carry caseloads, full caseloads immediately. So regardless of this being a 16.8 across the entire child welfare division, we are seeing we're just so incredibly happy with all the recruitment and retention work that our teams have been doing in the field.
Well, it looks good. Thank you for that explanation.
Thank you, Tom, for the question.
I'm just doing a time check with you, Frank. Is there anything else
so
you
I
want?
can. No, I mean, you all, I believe, have copies of these slides, and so we can roll through those pretty quickly. And we're just, again, thank you for the opportunity to share this information with you tonight. We appreciate your focus on this issue. it's a really important one. And so anything we can do, and if there's anything you want on in terms of follow-up data or methodology, or any of the things that I shared at the beginning of the meeting in terms of just other areas that we're working on and focus here, we're at your disposal to report on them. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Frank and Doreen, and thank you, Richard, for coming on a Friday night. This is like extra duty, so you really get positive points from all of us for being here. I appreciate that. And I do think that we look forward as a board to continuing this really important work. And I suspect we'll be trying to get an annual update because it's helpful to kind of see as if we have to work for 7 years to see the trend, see where the trends are going. So thank you.
We'll see you in 2028 then.
Yeah. How about we don't have to wait 7 years. All right.
Thanks, everyone.
So, group, we are now going to go to our public comment portion of the meeting. We have 5 folks signed up tonight for public comment. And before we start the public comment, I will start by reading our DCYF Oversight Board public comment statement. The DCYF Oversight Board operates under state law, which outlines its authority and responsibilities. Specifically, the board is responsible for monitoring DCYF's progress towards achieving outcome measures, ensuring DCYF's compliance with applicable laws and policies, overseeing DCYF's performance and policies, and offering advice and input to DCYF, the legislature, and the governor. While the board may consider information brought to its attention as part of its general oversight and monitoring role, it does not have the authority to investigate, direct, or alter DCYF's decisions in individual cases. Additionally, during public comment periods, neither the board nor meeting presenters can respond to comments beyond a simple acknowledgement. To respect individuals who may have sensitive stories to share or wish to discuss details of individual cases, we'd like to remind you that the board is subject to the Open Public Meetings Act. This means that the meetings are open to the public, recorded, and posted on the Oversight Board's website. They're also live streamed on TVW. Written public comments are submitted in advance will be sent to board members. I don't believe we had any written comments for this particular meeting. For those of you who are doing public comment, if you could try and keep your comments to about 3 minutes, that would be great. So we'll start with Kathy Elkins.
Okay, I'm unmuted. I don't see the camera.
We can hear you.
Okay, great. Well, I don't see the camera option, but I'll just get started. Good evening, and thank you for this opportunity. In January, I addressed this committee regarding serious issues about DCYF, and since then, my daughter and son-in-law have received unfounded letters. While my family does not require assistance, the families of Washington State, New York, South Carolina, and North Carolina do. My focus today is Dr. Susan Lamb, a former child abuse pediatrician from Marybridge, whose credibility remains unchallenged because DCYF has remained silent. DCYF possesses all the evidence they need about Dr. Lamb's incompetence and unethical practices. Their files, though some were only recently revealed in November of 2024, contain all you need. Some within DCYF knew of these issues and chose to conceal them. Dr. Lamb's opinions form the cornerstone of numerous DCYF child abuse cases. I understand exposing her may cost taxpayers money, but knowledge is liability. The financial harm to Washington State has already occurred and will grow exponentially if you continue to protect her. You can also demand that Marybridge produce the truth and terminate their MedCon contract. They have a concerning history with supervision of their CADE office. Just a few DCYF staff are negligent in this Thigpen case, knowingly supporting Dr. Lamb's falsifications. I provided detailed information to the Deputy Regional Administrator in July of 2023, along with the Ombudsman. Both of those ignored it. A bar complaint was also filed this past January about the Attorney General who filed DCYF's falsified dependency petition. What has become new to us were some emails and texts between DCYF and Dr. Lamb withheld from the court, which would have definitively discredited her. Dr. Lamb's report was so flawed, DCYF sent her 9 follow-up questions, including discrepancies about a forehead bruise and a skull fracture. They sent 4 increasingly urgent emails demanding a response, even contacting Seattle Children's Hospital when Lamb failed to reply. Dr. Lamb had previously told our family there was an explanation for the skull fracture misdiagnosis, or a skull fracture misdiagnosis, information we relayed to DCYF, who then questioned Dr. Lamb. Dr. Lamb denied it. Yet later in court, she said she did tell the family about issues with the slides. In her email response that finally came 19 days after she first submitted her report, she claimed to have omitted a forehead bruise. This was one of 2 actual injuries that were on a diagram of my granddaughter. In her original report, she only had 1. She actually changed her report to claim that after all these reminders, after grievance was filed, and after being called and leaving a message with DCYF, or after she called and left a message saying she was too busy to respond to their urgent messages, she was now changing her report, suddenly claiming she omitted the forehead bruise. Well, that was a lie. The forehead bruise was gone. The thick pins had already picked up the report and were never told that she made this change. The DCYF staff had described that bruise as gone and disappeared overnight before Dr. Lamb even saw my granddaughter. By the way, this was done 19 days later. She even supported her claims in court by falsifying a research title. Her courtroom behavior was observed by at least 3 DCYF staff the whole time. Dr. Lamb's courtroom testimony was riddled with errors, blatant perjury, misleading statements, and a shocking lack of professional skill. These cannot be dismissed as mere mistakes. They represent deliberate attempts to obscure the misdiagnosed skull fracture and exaggerate concerns about minor marks. With documented causes, she claimed to diagnose abuse in only 40% of her cases, while her nurse practitioner testified it was closer to always for children under 4 months in a Thurston County case. DCYF must have access to that data. DCYF had multiple staff members watching and apparently did not notify anyone. Lamb repeatedly denied that there was even a skull fracture diagnosis, despite its presence in her initial evaluation request, the 2 CPS intakes, the law enforcement report, medical records, DCYF's email to the father's employer, Dr. Lamb's own report to DCYF on October 5th, and 92 separate entries in DCYF's files. Dr. Lamb's testimony demonstrates a pattern of negligence, a disregard for the truth, and a failure to consult or look at medical records. She did not even speak to the family's babies.
Kathy, I'm sorry, but you're about 2 minutes over time. So
okay.
Can you just finish up quickly?
I sure will summarize, yes. I believe that you have an obligation to terminate relationship with Dr. Lamb. We have found out that she is still testifying in Washington state courts, even though she is no longer here and being deemed as credible by DCYF and being paid an expert fee. So I ask that you terminate that relationship.
Thank you so much for providing comment this evening. Our next comment will come from Tristan Fajita, and please correct me if I spelled your or sounded out your name incorrectly.
Nope, that was accurate. Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity to speak tonight. I'm coming as a group of foster parents and concerned relatives regarding House Bill 1227. And I just wanted to state that I understand that the Oversight Committee's job is to facilitate outcomes and track the success of legislature, but our ask is that you also consider the alternative outcomes. While House Bill 1227 has been decreasing the amount of kids in care, it's unfortunately resulted in significant statistical evidence of increased fatalities and near fatalities. And so in looking at outcomes and making sure that legislature is being carried out, we feel strongly that you can't have one without the other. You can't have decreased kids entering care as our only success story when we're not looking at what's happening on the other end. If kids are not entering care because alternative options are provided that keep families safe together, that's amazing. But if it's not being removed because the threshold is so high that kids are dying, then that's a bit of a problem. We wanted to encourage that the oversight committee read the fatality reports that are being put out by DCYF, and see that in those, it's often stated that House Bill 1227 can be a potential cause of this. And it's often stated that there are numerous CPS intakes that are screened out before these kids even come really truly into an investigation situation. There's also several incidences where the investigation is just getting started, kind of, but they're not able to actually even interview the parents before these children pass away, because parents are just able to not answer the door or not respond. So our ask is that these things all be looked at as a collective whole when judging the success of legislature, that kids entering care is decreasing at the same time that children passing away is decreasing.
Thank you so much for your comment tonight, Tristan. Next on our list is
I
Denny.
had a question real quick. That bill was 1227, but 1227 is a transportation bill in the House. Is that number correct, or is there something else?
This was about 3 years ago.
It's not for this session.
That's the bill that passed the different standards for removal.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay, our next public comment is Denia Ferreira.
I do not see that name in chat.
So is she not giving a comment then, Nicholas?
No, excuse me. No, I don't see the name. So.
Okay. All right, let's move on to Katie Cruikshank.
Hi there. Sorry, I was trying to get you a picture, but I can't figure it out. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Great.
We hear you.
I would like to follow up on Tristan's comments about House Bill 1227. It's not the initial reason why I wanted to speak. However, I had a child that was with me from birth to 6 months, given back to parents, even though parents did not complete what was required of them from the judge, and they did not complete their treatment plan. And then that child overdosed in parents' care in an unsafe situation, and was given back to me months later. That child spent 5 months with us again and is now back with that parent. Just having seen that side of it, I can say that it is, not to be religious, but by the grace of God, that 5 rounds of Narcan, a Narcan drip, and an emergency ride to Children's brought that child back to life. But that was a situation where I believe DCYF failed that child by giving him back with not requiring parents to actually do the plan that was set forth by them. I am also concerned that the child is back with parents, actually mom, because dad overdosed after the child was placed back with parents. I keep in touch with them, and I do believe that she's an amazing mother. However, I believe that when treatment plans are put out for parents, that they should complete them and definitely stop using drugs. The lock boxes are one of the most ridiculous things I think I've ever heard, because this parent was given a lock box and got so high, which I have 10 years of recovery. I got to tell you, when I used to do my drugs, I was not putting my drugs away in a lockbox when I was high afterwards. And so because of that, this child did overdose. However, I want to move on quickly, because the reason that I wanted to speak is to bring it to the board's attention the dissatisfaction that most foster parents and any that I've spoken to have with the new rate system that they are giving to children for caregiver support services. I have recently had a child, an infant. We're going through a diagnostic process that involves genetic illness. We have over 30 hours of appointments with specialists to try and figure out exactly what's going on with this child. And he's being rated a level 1. which is the lowest you can be rated, because there hasn't been a diagnosis given yet. And once that diagnosis is given, there's no going back and saying, oh, we see that this child should have been rated a different rating the entire time. Here you go. Here's the support you needed. And it's not just monetary support. It's also the support of people coming into your home and helping you manage the feeds, the appointments, travel to and from these appointments. I'm in Bothell and I have to go down to Tacoma, all of the things that come along with that. But because this child has yet to receive a diagnosis, we're in the diagnostic process, and we probably won't actually get diagnosis for another 4 months. We don't get any of that support, because when I disputed this level assessment, I was told that diagnosis is king, that no amount of therapy or appointments or whatever else you have to do out of your day to help this child will count unless they have a diagnosis entered into their medical chart. And I think that is very unfair.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I just want to make sure we have time for our last public commenter. Victoria Rivers.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak. My name is Victoria Rivera. I am a concerned parent and community member who has come here today to request that this committee help look into and, if possible, find ways to gather information on medically complex cases that come to DCYF due to suspicion of abuse, specifically for infants and young children, and how these cases are handled. The legislation that governs this agency and this committee is built on the belief that abuse must be reduced and prevented. But when it comes to these medical cases, there's a lack of due process for the families, and it needs to be better understood. Many times, social workers defer much of the decision of whether or not abuse occurred to medical doctors, and only then, after acquiring their opinions, such as earlier Ms. Elkins, I believe, mentioned Dr. Lamb, whom you've heard about today. Social workers will then assess families for abuse, which is often short-sighted, biased, and unfair, because families currently do not have the ability to contest or rebuke medical opinions before other children in the family are taken. So medically complex cases require specific questions to be asked, and those questions will not or ever be questions that parents will readily have available to inquire doctors, social workers, or investigators unless they are well-versed in medical fields or have professional training. So therefore, I believe that families should have the right to ask for a thorough medical differential with a multidisciplinary team that is usually already hired by the state to do these assessments, but these assessments need to include sicknesses or diseases, as well as genetic testings to rule out possible health problems that do not present with outward signs of abuse. In addition, families should have the right to have their child's entire medical record reviewed before their children get taken away, as well as the right to a second opinion. And this is all before their children are taken away. These are the types of solutions that these families need. And I'm just here to represent a group of other families to mitigate the harm done by the state and the hospitals that rush to report or look for abuse. And while keeping Families Together Act that passed in 2022 creates a higher threshold for state intervention, where the evidence for imminent risk of physical harm must now show a causal relationship between conditions in the home and the threat of harm. This specifically still does not protect these innocent families who bring their children to the hospital, who have legitimate concerns for their children's health, only to be blindsided by allegations of abuse in the hospitals and are being blocked from finding further resources to help their kids. We need policies and legislations that supports the right of innocent families to have due process when dealing with medically complex cases. I have only 3 minutes. I can't give details, but if you require more testimonies, I have contacts. I plan to continue to find more. This is a nationwide issue. Many states have already passed some laws to mitigate this. Washington families are not exempt from this short-sighted practice of policing the parents and families, and Washington State needs to follow suit. I know this may not be new news for some of you with Dr. Woods in the past, but this continues to still be an issue. My goal is to continue to educate state legislators, local politicians, and the community about this ongoing issue. I want to connect with families who are going through this to give them the right resources, and I want to make sure something is done about this. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Victoria, for spending some time on a Friday evening with us and giving your public comment.
So Dr. Levy, maybe we ask those people that just gave us their stories, if they have any written testimony, they could send it to us.
Okay, so for those of you who heard Representative Dent, if you would send written testimony to the legislators,
I think to our committee.
To the committee.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, there's committee, the Oversight Board. Yeah.
Then it can get distributed to
Nicholas.
the Oversight Board.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Break time. So everyone, we are scheduled to have a break until 7:40. And then we'll be back to look at a few more items before we hopefully get out of here before too long on a Friday night. So see everybody back at 7:40.
Thank you.
I think we're coming back in. Hopefully
There you are.
people
I
had
can
a
see you on the
chance
big
to.
screen. You're on the big screen here, Senator.
Oh no, that's probably not a good thing.
Oh, you look great.
Thank you. So, what we thought we'd do, before we get an update on subcommittees and what's happening is kind of give you a update on the legislative bills that are in play. And, do I see Representative Berquist? He may have popped off, but I shared, Nicholas, do you have do you have a document to share?
Yeah, let
on the
me share my
bills?
screen. Yeah, let me share my screen here.
So why don't we start with the one with the orange, because those are mine, and a lot of the bills are going to be companions, so I can kind of talk about where things are, if you will, on both sides. So the really the areas I think of interest to a lot of folks are the JR space and kind of what's happening with that. So if we kind of start up with 52, wait a minute, woo, is it 5278? There's a package of bills that we're working on in both the House and the Senate that have to do with diversion, that have to do with the overcrowding issue, and that have to do with something called voluntary transfer, and trying to figure out, especially with emerging adults, our 18 to 25-year-olds, when is it and how is it that may be appropriate that it's a process or a choice that they may choose to move into the adult system, especially if they've got a conviction that's going to take them for a period of time over to DOC. And so the bills around capacity and transfers, that Braun bill is in ways, and then I have a bill below 5296 around the juvenile sentencing and really around the diversion and discretion for the judicial side in how it is and when it is young people go to Green Hills or go to Echo Glen, and whether community placement or other kinds of home monitoring or secured kind of a setting is a better place for a young person who may not be have done a crime that would really justify in many ways heading to Green Hill. And again, we've got our younger young men and all of our women at Echo Glen, and then we've got our older individuals at Green Hill. So, hi, Rep Berquist. I was just going kind of down the list, and there's a lot of stuff that I was saying was companion. So I just might hit my highlights, and then you can hit kind of the highlights too, because we are doing a lot in the same space. Another one that folks might be interested in is the 5032, which is JR Ombuds. One of the things we have chatted about and found out was that the Office of Children and Family Ombuds in DCYF in the statute only covers children and youth. It did not cover the juvenile population, those emerging adults. And so have a bill that now adds those young people that are covered through the JR to 25 into the work of OVCO. Because when that overcrowding happened and when everything occurred, families nor the young people had anyone to reach out to. And that's because they were not covered in statute. And they were not covered by DCYF as far as any place where they could go to seek information or to share. And Team Child ended up being the nonprofit that supported them, but there was nothing within the agency or nowhere that they could go or parents could go to get questions answered when we heard young people were being, kept in their facilities, were unable to use the restrooms and all those kinds of things. So that is a piece that was added. Another one is the New Hope Act, and that's the opportunity for, again, emerging adults 18 to 25 who are futuring into the adult system to potentially at age 25 to go in front of the ISRB and to share with them what they've been able to accomplish and what they've been able to do that perhaps might shorten a sentence based on the merits of what they've been able to achieve and the outcomes they've had. That's a bill that's been in the works for a number of years. It's a bill that goes through Capital Classroom, and the young men at Green Hills are the authors of this bill and have been shepherding it through for, this will be the third session that it's being heard. So those kinds of things. I guess the other things are around extended foster care. There's bills happening around that, again, to make sure we're maintaining those young people and making sure they're housed. That is, I'm looking for the number. There's also extended, I'll get it in a sec. There's also a CHINS bill, and CHINS is Children in Need of Support. Those are our 11 to 15-year-old unaccompanied and unhoused minors. And so working with a program called HSync, which has been quite successful at being able to house these young people, and better known oftentimes as our hotel kids or our parking lot kids, those that don't have anyone to pick them up when they're being released, and we're releasing them into homelessness. And so really looking at what we're doing and how we're working on that. So a lot of work in the JR space. I'll just also, before I pass it over, say there's an unfortunate piece, and one of those for me is Fair Start for Kids was our landmark historic legislation around early care and education and child care. And because of our current budget situation and because of the investments and the cost, I dropped a bill 5752, which unfortunately kind of doesn't roll back, but does not maintain our forward momentum in much of the work we've done in early learning and early care and education. And it maintains the core programs in early care and education in DCYF, but is trimming a lot of those kind of programs and services and resources we've been able to provide to support providers out across the state. So that's one that we'll see a lot of activity and a lot of conversation on, but anyway, important nonetheless. I'll ask Nicholas to pass this, pass the sheet on. It changes every single day, so I'll make sure we update it before you get it. I'll just say policy cutoff was today, and so next week is Ways and Means all the time, and I'm certain the same for Berquist. And then it's fiscal cutoff, and then we do our thing. So with that, just a lot of conversation, a lot of concern, and also every day, as we heard earlier, with what's happening with our executive orders and federally, making sure we're protecting our young people and our families, and everything in our committees is discretionary. And that makes it very, very difficult when we have budget concerns and challenges. Easiest thing to cut. So, Steve, you want to do your thing? And I see Bobby, you have your hand up. Yeah.
Before we leave your bills, I see that one about us, 5199, passed already on the floor.
Oh, and that one is
You
that
might want to
the
note that.
I forgot to tell you that. Yes, 5199, which is the lived experience for DCYF Oversight Board members. Thank you, Bobby. Passed
Got your back,
49 to
darling.
zip, so it passed wholeheartedly across the floor. Yeah, that's a big one. So thanks for bringing that one up. I had sent that info to Elisha, but I forgot we hadn't met since then. That was one of our early action bills. So thanks. Happy to see that
Congratulations.
through.
Congratulations.
And thank you.
Yeah. Rep Berquist.
Thank you, Senator. You touched on a lot of the bills that kind of had companions over in the Senate. Some that are movers, hopefully movers in the House, are House Bill 1177, that's Child Welfare Housing Assistance. We just passed that out of Appropriations Committee, I think yesterday. That would make sure we try to work on the 108 families on the wait list right now to get housing assistance so that they can either stay together as a family or be reunited with their children. Also helps to extend those that are in that assistance program to keep them on a little longer to help with transition. The only other JR bill I don't think we touched on the Senate side is that we have a prison riot bill. It's House Bill 1815. There was a legislation passed maybe 4 years ago that was able to grant JR residents health care. Inadvertently, that roped in a prison riot statute. So JR residents had never been allowed to be charged with the prison riot offense. The legislature did not intend that to happen, but somehow there was a definition that got roped in that has all of a sudden found its way to one particular prosecutor deciding to use it. It sounds like about 200 times, and has convicted 75 residents of multiple, sometimes prison riot offenses, whereas they normally probably would have maybe faced a simple assault charge or had a demerit system going, which JR is trying to the hope is we can start that clock over on the prison riot offenses, since it was never intended to be used within the JR system. That's an important one, I think. We had really pretty impressive testimony and questions around that bill in committee. A couple others, Children in Crisis Program for the governor's office to be able to have a discretionary fund to continue that. There was a pilot that was very successful the last 2 years that we would like to continue so that we can just help children in those real crisis situations where they can't be discharged right now, or having trouble finding that next location for them. That's House Bill 1272. House Bill 1351 is ECAP age requirement bill. Right now you have to already have been 3 before September 1st to be in an ECAP program. This would allow children as they turn 3, if there is space in a program, so filling empty slots, to be able to access ECAP as they turn 3. There's a really good bill by Representative Dent. That is House Bill 1648. That would give some more time for our child care qualifications. Extending that deadline is, I think, a really important piece as we're coming out of COVID, and making sure that our child care providers can stay in business, as we're obviously we want a high quality child care workforce, but we need to give them more time to get there, and give DCYF some time to kind of go over what those recommendations are. I think those are pretty big bills to talk about for now. I'm sure if anybody else has any questions, happy to answer.
I also just wanted to, Diane, before you do the comment around the child fatalities, I wanted to make sure we have a couple child fatality bills, but one is 5163, and it's Senator Orwell's bill, and it's been in the works for a couple years, and there was just some tweaks they had to come to. And what that does is it really modernizes the child fatality statute in Washington State. It raises the age limit for child fatality reviews from 18 to 19. It changes terminology from child mortality to child fatality throughout the statute. And it emphasizes the importance of conducting child fatality reviews to identify preventable causes of child deaths and provides legal protections for families, health department officials, and healthcare professionals involved in those reviews. And so keep your eyes on that, because it is again one that has a hearing in ways and has been a bill that's been worked on and has they've come to a place of yes. So FYI. Diane, you had your hand up.
I did, but I was going to ask about the child fatalities bills, and you just completely answered that. But I was wondering, is there anything that is speaking to the child fatalities from the children that have been dying from the fentanyl overdoses, anything like that, the safety?
Well, 6109 is the bill I did last session on lethality, on the child and family responses. And so there's a lot of stuff already happening now that came out of 6109. You know, a lot of it is working with the opioid response, the dollars, the opioid settlement dollars, and doing SUD and MOUD treatment. There's work happening around plan of safe care. There's a lot of conversation, however, and I'm just gonna be really honest, not conflating the fentanyl crisis, which is a public health crisis, with kinship care, guardianship care, and keeping families together. That bill did not cause the fentanyl crisis. I just want to put that out there publicly and say we have a SUD and an MOUD crisis. That's a public health crisis we need to deal with, and we need to make sure children are safe. And so we also need to make sure families have the services and supports they need, because it's an addiction, and it's one that, yes, it is harmful to children, and if there is imminent harm, children are removed. But if there are services and supports that can be brought to a family and they can go through addiction services and remain that way, that is also a goal. And so it's an and both. And I just really need to say that, because there's a lot of belief that we just remove children and that's going to fix things, and that's not going to fix a lot of problems. So I'm more probably than I should say, but a lot of work happening in all spaces around that. Yeah.
Well, I guess one more thing maybe to add, Senator, is the situation we're in budgetarily.
Correct.
Every bill that's going through appropriations is getting a significant once over or twice over.
3 times over.
So $6 million fiscal note, they're coming out under 1 million, or, you know, so even if bills pass, they might not be in the shape that we were hoping for. Just kind of FYI this year.
Important side note. More to come. So I think, yeah, if people have questions, we can pass the lists on. And then I think we're up. And Nicholas is on next, I think, as we think about subcommittees. Or is that you, Diane?
No, that's
I
me.
think Nicholas, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. Just briefly, just wanted to touch base on the subcommittee process that we talked about in January, which is where Lisha asked for volunteers for 2 subcommittees. So the first one was the annual report subcommittee. So thank you to Dr. Marion Harris, Lois Martin, and Dr. Brenda Hahn for volunteering to be on the subcommittee. Their first meeting will be March 18th. The second subcommittee was the juvenile rehabilitation outcomes. And thank you to Dr. Diane Levy, Bobby Bridge, and Pamela Javier, and Danielle Johnson for volunteering to be on that subcommittee. And their first meeting will be February 26th, so just next week. And then, of course, once the subcommittees have met, we will continue to have updates at future board meetings to discuss, to hear out from what each subcommittee has been discussing. That's really my update. Questions on the subcommittees?
I think just one thing to add on the JR one, we are going to meet next week for the first time, but it was inspired by taking a look at what we're measuring and does it really measure what we ought to be measuring to decide whether or not we're doing a good job at JR, which is the outcome point. But also, we're going to, I hope when we talk as a committee to make a recommendation to the group here that we really pay particular attention to things at Green Hill for the next few months anyway of this year. I think it behooves us as an oversight board. This is kind of the not just burgeoning, but the existing crisis and something which we have not attended to as much as we have with some of early learning and child welfare, in my personal opinion. So hopefully we'll kind of even out the buckets.
Can I ask whether Bobby and whether Nicholas, do you all have access to like the legislative reports that we've gotten, say, on the overview of the audit on JR to 25? And JLARC is also doing a study that is just starting, but there is a review that was done, and that would be a great thing to share with the recommendations.
Yeah,
and
I'm familiar with it. But I'm familiar with it, but I think the people who are going to meet should have it too. Yeah.
Right. And I'll write myself a note because I just think some of those things, it would be great rather than duplicating.
We all know.
To actually have what's already there. Can I also just share one last thing before y'all leave? The other thing about JR, as we've talked earlier, I think about Stafford Creek, and they were talking about creating a leadership space, and it's going to be called Ascend at Harbor Heights. So it's no longer Stafford Creek, but they are moving forward that with the leadership program. And I just kind of heard that today. As far as really planning forward, they've got things moving, and I know that'll be part of the budget conversations as well. But as we're thinking about how it is we're trying to relieve some pressure, but also do some programming. So that's more to come. I had a chance to meet with Secretary Sen this morning and talked a little bit about that. So, I'm certain we'll hear more as things move forward.
Thank you.
That's it for me and for hopefully us. Does anybody have anything for the good of the order? Pamela.
Yes, Senator Wilson, I just wanted to say thank you. I was there at Youth Advocacy Day last week for advocating for Senate Bill 5082 and as well as for the House Bill of 1429. And I didn't get to see you that day to say thank you in person and give you a lovely hug. So I'm going to virtually give that to you. Like, it really meant a lot to me when I looked at who was sponsoring the bill. So thank you again.
I just deepest appreciation for that, and my door's always open. Would love to connect you and just keep you plugged in, not only here but anywhere else where your passion and your purpose meet. That's her job. So thank you for advocating, because your voice matters. That's a great way to end, is it not, man?
Well,
Diane.
I'm gonna just insert two quick things. One is that the next board meeting is on Thursday, March 20th, 9 to 1. And then Laisha also wanted us to pass on to you that we're in our next meeting, we're trying to have a specific, did we already talk about this, Claire,
No,
before
no,
I got on?
no.
No, okay.
No,
A specific,
okay,
we're trying to get someone to come and speak to us about working together as a board, respecting each other's opinions, power dynamics, all of that kind of stuff. So that's hopefully going to come in the next March meeting. We're hoping. And also, let's see, I think that's pretty much it. Anything else? Everybody's like, I'm just brain dead right by this time. So I know. This is not my finest hour. So thanks everybody for being here. Goodbye. Have a great weekend.
take care.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Good job, Nicholas.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nicholas.